accompanies us. In this faith, we gather to remember and celebrate the life of Donald L. Klippenstein. And in this faith, we also gather to grieve his death. God is here with us, and God welcomes all that we bring to ourselves to this time of worship. Our tears, our laughter, grief, relief that Don didn't suffer long, all of the feelings that we experience at the death of a loved one. Don was a member of this congregation since 1989. Not surprisingly, he was often involved in Mennonite Central Committee volunteer opportunities, as congregational representative to MCC Great Lakes, as a volunteer at the depot in 10,000 Villages. Betty and Shari continue to be involved in this congregation's life, and we welcome all the family here today as well. God calls each of us into being. God has called the whole world into being. I invite you now to repeat each of the lines that I will say after me, if you are able. The whole world has its beginning in God. The whole world has its beginning in God. In God is life and light. In God is life and light. That shall not be overcome. That shall not be overcome. Join me in prayer. God, our loving Creator, you call us into being and then accompany us and guide us like a shepherd in all the moments of life, in the pleasant places and the dark valleys. You're present with us in creation and as living word in all the moments of life, both the hard ones and the easy ones, when we are grieving and when we are celebrating. By your grace, you continue to call us into your great love, in our questions and our convictions, in our fears, and when we love well, when we wander away from you, and as we find our way back to you. May we experience your great creative love with us today as we release your beloved son, Don, into your everlasting love. And may we entrust ourselves and each other into that same great love through the living word, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. reading from Psalm 103. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and do not forget all his benefits, who forgives all your iniquity, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the pit, who crowns you with steadfast love and mercy, who satisfies you with good as long as you live, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. He will not always accuse, nor will he keep his anger forever. He does not deal with us according to our sins, nor repay us according to our iniquities. For as the heavens are high above the earth, so great is his steadfast love toward those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far he removes our transgressions from us. As a father has compassion for his children, so the Lord has compassion for those who fear him. Author and minister Frederick Buechner writes, "When you remember me, it means you have carried something of who I am with you, that I have left some mark of who I am on you. It means that you can summon me back to your mind, even though countless years and miles may stand between us. It means that if we meet again, you will know me. It means that even after I die, you can still see my face and hear my voice and speak to me in your heart." We're coming now to a time of sharing memories, and first I will invite Mike, Don, and Shari Klippenstein forward, and following that, Leonard Wiebe, and I will invite you, Leonard. And then, too, I will be reading a remembrance from Myron Schrag, who couldn't be with us today. So Mike, Don, and Shari.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for being here. Dad was a kind and honest man who gave me an opportunity to be what I wanted to be here in America. It is that opportunity that has led me to where I am today. He has taught me never to shy away from your responsibilities and that the family is the most important thing in life. This is why I am blessed with a beautiful and a loving wife and 4 unbelievable, beautiful children, which at times in my life I did not think I would have a chance to experience. He taught me to be kind to others and they will be kind to you, which I have followed and are teaching my kids. He also installed in me the love of sports, especially the Vikings. Sundays were 2 things in our house, God and the Vikings. But I think God has more wins. I am very happy that we were able to be here for their 60th anniversary in October. That was the last time I saw him, and to see how happy and full of life he was. And that is what I will remember about him, and we will miss him. Thank you.
Well, obviously this last week I've thought a lot about my dad, and I decided that we're not really here to mourn his death, but to celebrate his life. So if this was really a celebration of his life, and this is something that he would have planned that there'd be a lot of chocolate, a lot of pastries, and a lot of coffee to wash it down. When I was thinking about what I remember about my dad, I thought, you know, I came to the realization that, as you can see from the history in the bulletin there, that he lived a lot of his life before I came on the scene. So his time in Henderson, Nebraska, his farm deferment during World War II, taking horses to Europe after the war, going to college with his brother, graduate school, his short stint as a math professor at Bethel College, his marriage, his work in Korea, and adopting 2 kids there, and then moving to Wadsworth, Ohio, where I was born, and Fullerton, California, which neither of those places I really remember, but what I remember was starting in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area, or Edina, Minnesota. And like Mike had already said, one of the first things I thought of when I was thinking about him growing up was, just like Mike said, the Vikings on Sundays. And we'd have to move downstairs to watch the games so that my mom wouldn't hear constant yelling at the referees and the players and the coaches. Not that we were mad at them, we were just giving them helpful advice. It seemed almost like endless hours doing that, but probably the endless hours was talking about the game beforehand, talking about the game afterwards, and talking about the next season when it was off season. He also played sports with us too. It wasn't just watching them. That was part of his, like Mike said, you know, his dedication to family. He practiced baseball with us when we were growing up. Even though he wasn't really an avid baseball player, he would always be out there throwing the ball with us, pitching to us, hitting to us. And he always liked to shoot basketball on the driveway. We had a basketball hoop there. One of the things I wasn't thinking of until I got here a couple days ago was the hours we spent out on the driveway, not only playing basketball, but shoveling snow. You know. Now that we live in Florida, it's, you know, you don't think of those things much, but sometimes we'd be out there shoveling snow so that we could play basketball on the driveway. One thing that I'm reminded of was the hours and dedication he spent helping us out on our paper routes for 5 years. But every Sunday morning at 5:30, he'd wake us up and we'd get up and he'd help us deliver newspapers. At one point, I think he had a station wagon. He'd put papers in the back, and he'd drive down the street slowly, and we'd run back and forth all the houses on both sides and deliver all the papers. And so for 5 years, you know, he did that. And I'm thinking back, you know, I wouldn't have done that. You know, I would have said, no, do not get, if that requires to that, do not get a paper route. You know, I'm not going to do that on Sunday morning. But that was what he was like. He made sacrifices for his family. And I remember one other time he would drive me back and forth to Bethel College from Minneapolis, which is over 600 miles. And one time he had a medical emergency in the middle of the trip. And you know, I was thinking, well, we've got to get to college. I got to see my friends. And here he was having this problem. And you know, when I think back on it, it's, you know, just amazing that we stopped in an emergency room and he got taken care of, and then we went on our way. You know, that was what he was like. You know, I was thinking of myself at the time, but you know, he was thinking of his family. And speaking of driving, I don't know if one thing I'll remember about my dad is that he always seemed like he was in a hurry to get someplace. whether it was driving or walking. He was a very fast walker, and he had problems walking with a group. He'd usually walk up ahead, and I think that's probably where I get that from too, you know. It's where driving someplace is, you get in a car to drive somewhere, not to enjoy the ride, but to get somewhere. In his last years, he obviously didn't travel as much. He couldn't drive to see us anymore, although we did have him come down a couple of times to Florida. But so most of our interaction at the last few years was over the phone. So I'll always remember the typical conversation on the phone, which after about 45, 50 minutes, then there was a voice that you can guess who said this, was, "Don, are you still there? Are you still awake?" That was my mom. And at that point he'd say, yes, I'm here. And then he would just say how thankful he was about different things. He'd say he was thankful for his health, for different aspects of his family, just for the fact that he could see different friends or family or get calls from them or visit them. And I think this last year, although it was difficult, since he had a big stroke in January 2014, he still got to celebrate, like Mike said, his 60th wedding anniversary and his 90th birthday. And I think that meant a lot to him and to us as well. Thanks.
I'll have to shorten it a little. It's interesting how we form perceptions of others, sometimes based on the context in which we know them. We may know them for only a brief moment out of their entire life, or we may have known them for many years. Just when we think we know someone, we find out there's more to them that meets the eye. That could be said about my father. My father was a young farm boy from the plains of Nebraska who grew up during the Depression era. After age 18, he became a Victory Cowboy, or as the newspapers would say in those days, a seagoing cowboy. For those of you who don't know, these were young farmers who were hired near the end of World War II to transport cattle and horses to war-torn Europe. My father sailed on a battleship called the Victory that took horses to Poland. The trip was across the Atlantic, lasted several months. It was hard work, battling storms at sea, being kicked by horses, and avoiding the temptations of sin at every port and call along the way. Hundreds of Mennonite men across the country joined the cause, my father being one of them. What a cowboy. My father was also an athlete, as my brothers have mentioned. Played basketball in high school and college, but he also involved his daughters on the basketball court at home with those free throw shots. I was at a disadvantage because I was short. Then he became a science programmer. That was before personal computers were invented and before computing science was a college major. He had the privilege of working with Shari UNIVAC when they contracted with NASA. He worked on the software that controlled the temperature for the heat shields for Apollo 2. Years later, when they were laying off workers left and right, they offered my father a new job. They had him transferring old computer data programs into the new software specs and rewriting operations manuals because he was that good with numbers. After retirement, my father dove into genealogy research. And as a result, he found out that he was a third cousin to Paul Revere, as in Paul Revere and the Raiders. Rock on, Dad, rock on. He got excited when he found out that they were coming to the Elkhart County here in August of 2003. So he got his genealogy research together and went to meet him. If you can picture this scene, a somewhat frail older man with a genealogy report in hand, standing next to a young, strong, athletic bouncer, telling him that he needed to get backstage to see Paul Revere. Right, yeah. Well, he got backstage, came out with a signed photo and CD. At 79 years of age, my father took my mother to their first and only rock concert. Some people would say, how cool, Don, that you are related to somebody famous, but not my father. He rarely even talked about it. My father didn't even go to meet Paul because he was a famous rock star. He went to meet him because he was family, and that was important to him. Another title my father held was volunteer, as Tim had said earlier. He started out with his service in the Victory Cowboy, later on became an MCC volunteer with Mom in South Korea. And like my brother Mike, I am very grateful, or I wouldn't be here. Then after retirement here in Goshen, he worked at the depot and was very proud to tell me about his experiences at 10,000 Villages and Meals on Wheels. All the ladies would give him brownies and cookies on those routes. And I think each year it took a little longer to get those meals delivered because he had more food that was being offered. So, like many of you, a volunteer service is a very important part of his life. My father wore many hats. He had many titles throughout his life, of which other people remember him for, like being a computer programmer or professor or an 8th Street Mennonite church member, all of which he was proud of to be a part. But the two titles he excelled at the most were as being a good husband and a good father. He was kind and gentle. He never boasted or sought out praise. He had a strong faith in the Lord, and he treated others with respect. Even with all the things I have mentioned, his accomplishments, all the titles he held, I will remember him the most as the father who used to wake me up each Sunday morning, gently leaning over the foot of my bed, and with a big smile would tickle my toes to wake me up, saying, "Wake up, sleepyhead, it's time for church." I will remember him as a gentle man of unwavering faith.
The mention of Don's love of chocolate reminds me that I've known Don about a year since I came here a year ago. And one of the first things I learned was that on the 8th of the month, we go to Juniper Place along with a couple of other places for muffins with the folks that live there. And I found out early on to always make sure I had at least one chocolate muffin in that box so that Don could have that. Leonard Wiebe, would you come and share with us at this time?
It has been a joy for me to learn to know Don during the past 7 years that we have lived in Goshen. When I hear all these stories, I feel like I've missed so much of his life that is so exciting. And to hear about these horses that were shipped, I didn't realize that he was one of the persons that went with these horse boats. Well, Don and I had several things in common. Don grew up in Henderson, Nebraska, as you've already noticed in the writing, and this being a rural farming community. And since I grew up in a farming community in central Kansas, we often reflected upon our earlier experiences. We love to talk about what we did on the farm, horses and cattle and all that kind of thing. So we enjoyed that together. Another event that we have in common is that we both attended Bethel College in North Newton, Kansas, and that we both met our wives at Bethel. That was very important to him, and it was important to me. And if you ever wanted to get into a conversation about schools, Don would always mention Bethel College as his prized place of education. Don first studied at Bethel, and then later for a time he became an instructor of math at Bethel College. Although he was there before me, yet we still knew many of the same instructors. We often spoke about the teachers at Bethel that made a difference in our lives. It was obvious that Don had a great appreciation for Bethel College and was ready to recommend that school to any young person that he talked to. I think that Don and I both felt indebted to Bethel College, not only because of a great education, but because there we found our life partners who have brought us so much joy and meaning. In the years that we attended H Street, we had many occasions to visit together, both on Sunday mornings here in the fellowship hall and also attending the men's luncheons at the trolley. Don, as you already know, was an avid reader. Newspapers, magazines, books, and other periodicals. He was always well versed on current events and also any developments in the larger Mennonite church. Whatever news was reported in the Mennonite or the Mennonite World Review, Don was informed on the issues and he had read all the articles. What I appreciated most about Don was his strong faith in God, and this has already been mentioned. His commitment to Christ was a guide for his life. He had a genuine faith that was well thought out, and he felt free in expressing his views on his own faith to others and sharing that. I always observed that he lived out his faith in his daily encounters with various persons that he spoke to or with. I also appreciated his strong commitment to the Anabaptist Mennonite understanding of the faith. He was not hesitant to share his convictions regarding the need for peacemaking and for working for justice in our world. Don took an interest in others. I noticed that he would listen to others that were speaking and absorbing that and interacting with them, and also to affirm people. Don took an interest in many others. He involved his life with theirs and compared notes, and it was a joy to always visit with him. His kindness and sensitivity was evident to all of us. And has already been mentioned, the church was always a very important part of his life. If there was any activity taking place here at H Street Church, Betty and Don were almost always there. He was deeply devoted to his family, as we have heard already this morning. My, what all he did with the children, grandchildren, and most of all with his wife, Betty. Don was an inspiration to me and to many of us. He was a person who was devoted to Christ, who shared his love and his friendship with all of us.
This comes from Myron Schrag, who couldn't be with us today. In Don's passing, I have lost a valued and good friend. I first learned to know Don when I pastored Faith Mennonite Church in Minneapolis, where Don and Betty were members. For a time, Don served on the church board and always gave wise counsel. Don was a kind, gentle, and thoughtful person. I always enjoyed our many discussions about sports, politics, religion, or other topics. When there was something happening that he didn't agree with, he would invariably say, "That's crazy." Don enjoyed the twice-monthly men's lunch, and when he was no longer able to drive, I picked him up. I will miss doing that. We were all amazed how much Don could eat despite his slender frame. Along with Herb Fretz, Bob Wardinger, and myself, Don was a member of the Four Tenors, not because of our singing ability, but because we all have birthdays on January 10th. For many years we have met to eat ice cream and cake and exchange humorous cards. I will miss him. May he rest in peace. Turn in your worship hymnal to hymn number 500, or rather 311, The Church's One Foundation. from the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. And from the prophet Micah, with what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you